Welcome to week 5, and today we're going to be talking about the social conditions of class inequality and specifically debt. So, when we talk about the social conditions of class inequality, I want to talk about debt because it is the sort of foundation of economic power and subsequently financial stability in an American capitalist economy. And the reason that that is true is because we live and work in a system of racial capitalism. We understand that American social structures are racialized, and America's economic structure is capitalist. Therefore, we live and work under a system of racial capitalism, which means that the financial positions of an individual are both quantitatively and qualitatively different by race. Okay, so let's talk about the racial wealth gap, which is perpetuated by this system of racial capitalism. In the United States, the wealthiest 100 white people hold more of the wealth than all black families in the United States. I don't know why I laughed. That's not funny, but it's funny in its audaciousness. It seems like a statistic that you're just making up to make your argument sound more important. But in reality, it is true and very much indicative of this disparate economic system that we have in the United States. Here you can see that Black and Latinx households have less than 1/10 the amount of wealth as white households. So in the thousands of dollars compared to the hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's the kind of difference that we're talking about. Okay. The social conditions of debt depend on whether you're talking about debt as an asset or debt as a liability. Are you talking about good debt, that's debt as an asset, or bad debt, that's debt as a liability? And whether you're talking about good or bad debt depends on a couple of things. What debt services and products are you using? What do you pay to utilize those services and products? And what do you gain at the end of the repayment period? What do you have left to give back, right? So if I am talking about a mortgage debt, then I should have a home that's worth something at the end of my loan period. Same thing with a car or a boat or anything sort of tangible like that. The difference comes in the likelihood that the kind of debt you're taking on leaves something to gain in the aftermath or not, and that can be highly racialized as well. So let's use payday loans as an example. So in this, as punishment for not paying within the 2-week window. So in 1 month, you've paid $90 on $300. In 2 months, you've paid $180 on $300. In 6 months, you've paid over $1,000 on $300. And if you need a whole year to pay it back, you've paid more than $2,000 in interest on a $300 loan. Now you might say, who would do that? That seems like a terrible idea. But payday loans are predatory such that they are easy to obtain for people who are most likely to need them, but they don't take into account necessarily as much as the high status credit card and bank companies would, your ability to pay it back. And in fact, they benefit, they're betting that you won't be able to pay it back in the 2 weeks, thus that extra $45 charge, because they, the payday loan company, benefits from you not paying your loan back in time. Whereas credit card companies really do, in a lot of ways, want you to pay down your credit every month. Payday loans don't necessarily want you to do that. The big money is in you defaulting on your loan, in which case they can put a lien against your salary, against anything that you own, and take lots and lots of interest on what was probably originally a very small dollar amount. Okay, when we talk about the social conditions of class inequality this way, we have to talk about the way that white debt builds and sustains white wealth. So for white people, most white people, credit is a status symbol. Do I have an American Express card? Do I have a Platinum MasterCard? What is my credit limit, if there even is one, on the credit card? And don't I want to pull out what is often a very pretty, visually attractive card in front of my friends and family so that they can see that my credit is so great that I have accessed this special fancy credit card that's just for the wealthy and the high status. Oftentimes, in less visible white debt, that is government subsidized, right? So if you're talking about home values in neighborhoods, well, government federal housing policy essentially subsidizes the values of homes positively for white families and negatively for black families. Redlining continues to happen all across the country. Student loan debt, which we'll see some charts about in a few minutes, is another government subsidized debt product that white families are able to utilize to their benefit, to be able to send their kids to a college or university that they might not otherwise be able to pay for. But their child is much more likely to benefit economically from attending that high status school that they couldn't afford. And so they use student loans to subsidize what they can afford for that education. And it's much more likely that that student will in turn pay that loan back because they will have access to credit as status that will allow them to do that. Or they will be able to purchase a home with the help of their families that will allow them to extract value and wealth from that allows them to pay off their loans. There's lots of different ways that that white families use student loan debt as a tool to improve upward social mobility chances. Black debt, by comparison, extracts and persists. It's not adding status to an individual's life. It's defining and constraining, by comparison, their class identity and the class identities that are the most accessible to them. This is via the exploitive systems of credit in Black communities. Companies like Rent-A-Center, right, where you can rent furniture and appliances and electronics at, again, high interest rates, like at the Payday Loans, for people who maybe cannot afford to pay for those things up front. Things like couches are really expensive. If you need a couch, you're probably going to pay at least $500. Well, if you don't have $500 extra dollars of disposable income, but there's this company in your neighborhood that will rent you a couch for $30 a month, then you're likely to decide to do that. But that $30 a month gets added to all of your monthly expenses that need to be paid for via a salary that's considerably less than your white counterparts. In areas where the rents and the mortgage interest rates are higher, and therefore you have less disposable income to spend on these things and are much more likely to default and then rent-a-center benefits. Again, it becomes this system of white benefit and black disadvantage in a lot of the same ways that we see other social structures. There's also the prison to debt pipeline. It costs money to be a prisoner. You are accruing debt every day that you are in prison relative to what you are being paid, which is often pennies on the hour, even if you're doing things like fighting wildfires. And so you come out of prison with a bill that must be paid back, but also a stigma that makes it difficult to do things like get a job, find a steady place to live that would allow you to start to maintain a class identity that would allow you to pay those things back, and that is going to land you in more debt and may even land you back in jail, and that's where we get a lot of the recidivism issues amongst black and brown prisoners in the United States. And then let's look at some charts which will sort of illuminate some of this debt stuff that I'm talking about. So first, we have median household wealth for 25 to 40-year-olds in 2016. So this is my generation of people. You can see that even with student loans, white families have way more wealth than black families. On this chart, you can see that black graduates hold the most student loan debt by degree, both bachelor's and associate degree, compared to any other race of college graduate. And that's the kind of statistic that then gets perpetuated in black graduates' inability to use their college degree to be upwardly socially mobile. Because again, they're likely to be paid less, they're likely to hold more debt, they're likely to have more bad debt, which compounds itself and sort of suppresses upward social mobility in a way that doesn't happen for white college graduates or Latinx or Asian or even Native American and Pacific Islander, as you can see from this chart. Okay, here you can see that black households have more student loan debt at lesser household incomes than white families, which again impacts the debt to income ratio, which is something that those high status credit cards and banks are looking for before they let you open accounts with them. How much debt do you have versus how much money do you make? Well, if you only make $50,000 a year and you have $100,000 in student loan debt, well, that's not a very good debt to income ratio. You're paying a lot back in student loans relative to how much you're making. You're probably paying about 25% in housing expenses and so on and so forth. That stuff starts to add up really quickly. All right. And then this last one, I just want you to see how this works when we talk about these government subsidized examples like home mortgages. So this is looking at the value of a first home purchase for white families versus black families compared to the amount of mortgage debt when purchasing that first home from black families compared to white families. And you can see that there's more than a $13,000 difference in the value of the home for white families compared to black families, and a $15,000 difference in the amount of mortgage debt for white families compared to black families. When you put that together, what you're talking about is a net of more than $28,000 in home value compared to debt, which will impact sort of overall what you gain, what you're able to extract from this home when the loan is paid off. It also will impact how quickly the loan is paid off, how much interest you end up paying on the loan. We're also assuming that there are different interest rates that are happening here, which will also create a gap in the amount of wealth that is able to be extracted. When you layer this onto the amount, the difference in home ownership compared to white families and black families, you can see even more how this good debt versus bad debt, asset debt versus liability debt really does impact class status and class hierarchy for people in this country by race. Okay, that is all that I have for you guys today. I don't have an active learning exercise. I would just say please read Black Debt, White Debt, which is on Canvas in the Week 5 folder, written by Louise Seamster, who is a fellow Vassar alum, and this is a really great article that helps you understand sort of the social condition of debt and the way that it impacts class inequality in the United States. And come prepared to discuss next week. See you then.